This is our case three, the decision analysis. My name is Kyle Jensen, and I'm going to be talking about the Amazon part one in our Excel document. So, our thing for the part one here is we have recession, we have growth, we have the economic boom with their probabilities in there. And all of those numbers that are underneath for buy Whole Foods, buy Trader Joe's, and do nothing, that's all in the Word document. That's where we got all that data. Moving over to the expected monetary value, it's telling us between all three of those options that the 122 start there, I think it's like 122 million, something like that, I believe. It's telling us that the best option would be to buy Whole Foods. The minimum value to tell us, like, the minimum outcome, the less damage, would be to buy Trader Joe's. And then the maximum is telling us to buy Whole Foods with the 260 million, something like that. Going down our expected value with perfect information, that's how much that's worth. Our best expected value to come out would be the 122 million, I think that is, and then the value of our perfect information from the best expected value is I think that's 30 million. Going down to the regret table, that's just telling us if we chose the better outcomes or different outcomes, what kind of monetary regret we're going to have in each part. And then over to the expected part there, telling us what we're expected to have for regret would be, it's telling us to buy Whole Foods. That would be our least amount of expected regret. And then the maximum amount over there is also telling us to buy Whole Foods at that expected regret. All right. That is Kyle Jensen, and moving on to the next person.
Right, so my name is Mitchell Goneau, and here I'm doing Amazon Part 2. So you can see up at the top of the screen there, you have two different probabilities. One of those is the probabilities of going into a recession versus not going into a recession. This is very similar to Amazon Part 1, except we only have two options instead of three, which is buying Whole Foods or just continuing on with Amazon Fresh. Then over on the right there, you see your expected monetary value, which is just a weighted average of the probabilities versus the options. And you can see there that if you were going to choose an optimistic point of view, then you would want to be going with the highest expected monetary value versus if you're going with pessimistic, you'd probably be looking at the minimum expected monetary value. Cruising down to the expected value of perfect information, you can see what our best expected value is compared to what the expected value would be if we knew whether or not there would be a recession. And the difference between those two numbers is what our expected value of the perfect information actually is. Moving down to regret, what it's really talking about is just the opportunity loss. So the amount of money that we could have made essentially if we had made a different business decision. And then you can see what your expected opportunity loss would be versus the maximum opportunity loss on any given situation. So that's Amazon Part 2 explained. Moving on to Amazon 2, Round 2, very much the same thing except with leads, which are provided for us with Bayesian analysis. 35% and 90%, a little bit different, but the same type of concept over on the right with the expected monetary value. Again, you can look at optimistic versus pessimistic, depending on if you want to take the minimum or the maximum. Again, cruising down to the expected value of perfect information. You can see what our expected value of that is, which is just, again, the difference between the best expected value we're going to get versus the expected value we would get whether or not we knew there would be a recession versus not a recession. And again, the regret or opportunity loss down at the bottom, telling us what we can expect to lose out on depending on which one of those decisions that we were to make.
I'm Zach. I'll be going over the Bayesian analysis part of the case three. So you start with the initial prior probabilities of 30% and 70%, 30% of there being a recession and 70% of there being no recession. Then you factor in the conditional probabilities for recession and no recession. Over here on the left is where it would be for purchasing Whole Foods. And below it here would be essentially doing nothing and staying with Amazon Fresh. And you can see the percentages are 65% and 35% for recession for each of those different sections. Then we plug that into the calculations table in order to find the joint probabilities, which we find by plugging in the prior probabilities as well as the probabilities for the Whole Foods section up here. So you multiply the prior probabilities by that to get the joint probability over here. And that comes out to 0.195 and 0.070. And when you add those up together, you come out with that. And then once you finish that with, you move on to the posterior probability, and you get that by using your initial percentages, the prior probabilities, and plugging them back through the conditional probabilities using the Bayes analysis.
Okay, I am Liam Phelan, and I'm going to be explaining the decision tree for the for whether to buy Whole Foods or to do nothing. So basically, it can be split up into whether there's a recession or there's not a recession for each possible decision. If a recession is forecasted, there's the highest possible chance that a recession will occur at 65%, which would result in a loss of $2 billion. And if the recession was not forecasted, there would be a 90% chance of a recession not occurring, which would result in a profit of $5.8 billion. And if the recession is not forecasted, if the recession is forecasted, the best possible scenario would be to do nothing, because they would result in a profit of $4 billion if a recession were to occur, as opposed to a loss of $2 billion if it were to not occur. But if the recession is not forecasted, the best decision would be to buy Whole Foods, because it would result in a profit of $5.8 billion with a 90% chance of the recession not occurring.